G'day teachers, and welcome to what is going to be one of the most exciting webinars I think we've ever done, which is all about the Microsoft Translator app. It is an amazing tool that can be used for EAL students, deaf and hard of hearing students, and other students as well. It's really quite exciting. I've got Will Lewis, who is the Principal PM Architect from Microsoft in Seattle. He's coming in today to tell us all about the awesomeness of the translator and how it can be used in your classroom. I've also got a panel of teachers that we're going to bring in who are going to be asking questions. And don't forget, if you're on a live webinar right now, there's also a live Q&A available to you to fire your questions through as well. So let's get to it, hey?
Sure. My name is William Lewis. I'm a Principal PM Architect on the Microsoft Translator team here in Seattle, Washington. And Microsoft Translator is a product that allows you to translate between languages. It's aptly named for that reason. And I've been with the team since its beginning, about 13 years ago. I started when we were just releasing it as a product. Its focus then was on translating text, so like documents and that kind of thing between languages. We had a very small set of languages at that time, I think 8 languages when we started. And we now support over 70 languages, and that list continues to grow. The main focus of Translator now is not just the text translation, which is what we traditionally have done, but also speech translation. So you can talk into an app, let's say, and have it not only transcribe what it is that you're saying, but also translate what it is you're saying. And this is something we started working on about 6 years ago. It's a little over 6 years ago. It was kind of what I call a skunkworks project. It was something that we were working on in secret for integration into Skype initially. So we called it Skype Translator. That came out just about 6 years ago. And then integration into other products as well. So you'll see some of the end results of some of that work of the development of this speech translation facility. So when I'm giving a talk, generally I like to jump right in and start using the technology. So the next slide actually shows you how to join the session. And right now you don't have a session ID. So you can join using the Microsoft Translator app if you have that on your device. You can also join using the browser. So you can go to this website and join. So let me actually show you how to do this. First of all, I'm going to activate a session. I'll walk through how to start your own session a little later in this talk, but I've started a session that's captioning what I'm saying. And so right now you'll see the captions of what I'm saying showing up on the screen. And this session is something that you can join from your own device. So you'll see this conversation code up here at the top. You'll see a QR code as well. You can join from your mobile device using that QR code or typing in this code here. So you can go to this website. If you type this into your browser, it doesn't matter what the browser is, it will actually start to show the captions on your local device. You can also scan this using the Microsoft Translator app. What will happen is you'll see the captions of what I'm saying on your device in the language you choose. So what's interesting about this is it doesn't have to just be English. You can see the captions of what's being talked about in your respective language. So that's particularly useful in education because oftentimes we have students who are recent immigrants to the country who may not know the language and need help with accessing content in their native language. Likewise, parents, and this is something that's oftentimes overlooked. Parents oftentimes struggle with this and oftentimes struggle with it a lot more than students do. I'm going to, just to give you an idea of how this works, I'm going to join on my phone as well. So I'm using the Microsoft Translator app on my phone. I'm going to scan this code just to give you a sense of the kind of interactions you can have. And so I'm joining on my phone. And this same session, you'll see that I will phone joined there. So Adrian and I are in the call right now. And what I'm seeing on my phone is not only the English transcripts, I'm also seeing them in Russian. So I joined in the Russian language as well. So I'm seeing captions of what's being talked about in a different language. So maybe I'm a Russian speaker and I can then get captions of what's being talked about in Russian. Now, to make the demo even more interesting, it could be interactive. So I don't have someone who speaks another language. I speak a little bit of Russian, so I'm going to switch. I'm going to turn this off right now, so just so while I'm speaking Russian, it doesn't try to caption my English. Ну, сейчас я могу говорить немножко по-русски. Не знаю, что я должен сказать. And so what you saw there was me speaking in Russian, but when you look in the screen, you'll see that it translated it into the language that I have joined the session in. So I'm getting the translations in English here as an English speaker. The Russian speaker, of course, is getting them in Russian. If someone else joins in another language, they'll get it in their respective language. So you can have these kind of multilingual conversations simultaneously. You can talk to not just one parent, but you can talk to multiple parents at the same time, irrespective of the languages that they speak. So on this screen, you see instructions more or less illustrated about how to join a session. And this right here is the multi-user mode in the Translator app that you want to select. And then you can either join a session or start your own. Right now, we're joining the session that I had started. So all of my guests here are actually joining that session. But you could easily start your own. That's what I did. I created a session myself, and then you're joining that session. So you create the session, and then people can join that. And then you have the session ID. You specify your name, and then the language that you want to view the captions or the transcripts in. There's a video on how to do this that describes it in good detail, and this video link is right here. I'm going to move to the next page. If you're joining not from the Translator app, but from your browser, you'll get a window that looks something like this, where you navigate to this URL, you enter the conversation code, and then you specify your name and language. And then you enter the conversation. So you'll see something very similar to what I showed on the screen when I was showing the captions. And this has gotten a lot of use within education. And these are images from schools around the world, in fact, that are using Microsoft Translator for various kinds of engagements. Now, I don't want to downplay the accessibility uses of this. This is used not just for multilingual communication, but also for folks who are deaf and hard of hearing. A good example is right here. This is at a university where there's a large population of deaf students. The professor will teach in English, and the students will see captions on their screens in English. But you will also see an example here. This is in India. This is a school that teaches primarily in English, but the parents, a number of the parents are from the region, and they don't speak English particularly well, and so they're able to get captions in Tamil and Telugu as an example. So they can come to sessions provided by the school that are conducted in English and then see the captions in their native languages. And then this school here, a good example here is this student, I believe, speaks French, and she doesn't understand English particularly well, so she is using her laptop with a headset and actually listening to the French audio from the transcripts. So the teacher here is speaking in English, the student is seeing French transcripts and hearing the French. And then this example up here in the upper right is a teacher who is communicating with a parent who speaks Spanish, and they're communicating. The parent is using a mobile device, the teacher is using her laptop. So a one-on-one kind of engagement here. And I'll talk about some of these scenarios in more detail. There's a lot of detail on this site. If you go to this Translator EDU site, that has a lot of information about how to use Translator in various kinds of education scenarios. So let's talk about this in a little bit more detail. I'll give some more background, and then what I'll do is after I give some more background on this, I'll actually walk through how to start a session. So we'll start a session from scratch, so you can see the steps I go through to actually create a session so you could follow the same thing in your classroom, start a session, and then have students join that session. So the underlying tech I mentioned speech translation. So speech translation more or less takes the speech signal, so like what I'm doing right now, and generating transcripts from that signal. So it runs through what's called automatic speech recognition to generate transcribed output. Now, what tends to happen is that we don't talk very fluently. When we talk, a lot of times there are pauses and pause words, and we repeat words and stuff like that. That's actually difficult to read in transcripts. So we run an AI over that removes some of the disfluent content that's in the output. When that's removed, it's easier to read for someone who reads whatever the native language is, in this case, English. But it's also easier to translate. So one of the reasons we did this is to support both deaf and hard of hearing users, to provide them better captions, and also users that speak other languages so they can provide better translations for them. We do partial translations and final translations. I won't go into all the details here, but you'll probably notice sometimes that when a translation is happening, you'll see the words translate, and then when the sentence is done, it will kind of solidify into a better translation. So having the entire context of translation tends to be better. And then finally, at the end, if the user chooses, they can turn on the audio and listen to it in their own language. And these are the number of languages we currently support for each of these. This number here is actually relatively small, and that's going to increase rather dramatically in the next couple of months as we bring a bunch more languages online. And this is kind of how it plays out in the school scenario. You have a student here who actually is hard of hearing. He has cochlear implants, and he sits in a class and is able to watch the transcripts of what the teacher is saying and participate then more fully in the class. Now, he has some hearing ability because he is wearing the implant, but implants tend to drop off after about 1 or 2 meters. That makes it difficult for him to hear someone who might be across the room. The transcripts then give him the ability then to kind of, if he misses anything, to go back and look. And you'll notice, like with this student, when I would watch him, he would most of the time be looking at the teacher or other students in the class, but sometimes he'd get like a quizzical look on his face and then look over the transcript, sometimes scroll back, because it was clear that he had missed something. And so this kind of fills in the blanks for him. And this is kind of step-by-step instruction on how to do this. I'll walk through this in more detail, but more or less the teacher wears a mic. I recommend that. So this is a mic that she's wearing. It's very similar to the mic that I'm wearing right now. And that mic then is connected. This one is connected via Bluetooth to the computer that she is using to create the caption stream. And then that caption stream is then transmitted over Wi-Fi or wire connections to the various devices in the room. And this is an example of the transcripts and more closer up. The quality tends to be pretty good. And I'll towards the end of my presentation, I'll talk a little bit about the quality, how we can measure quality. It is not going to be perfect. There will be errors in the signal. There are actually a couple of errors in this screenshot, but generally you can eliminate a lot of those errors if you're wearing a reasonably good quality mic. One of the reasons we recommend mics is number one, it brings the mic closer to your mouth, so it tends to do better when you're close talking. But also, if you're wearing a mic, it tends to filter out some of the ambient noise in the environment. What tends to reduce the quality of speech recognition is if there's a lot of noise. So if you have a lot of students shouting and there's a lot of ambient noise, if you're using the microphone on the laptop, it will tend to pick up all of that noise. And so they will try to transcribe that noise, then you'll just get random stuff that will show up in the transcripts. If you wear a mic, especially one that's somewhat directional, it filters out all of that additional noise and it's just more or less getting the speaker. So we can see this being used in a number of scenarios. I talked about it in the classroom scenario, but it's also, I think, useful in engagements with parents. And I want to stress that that's actually, I think, one of the more powerful uses of this technology. Students who have immigrated to a country within, depending on their age, within a few months to a year, will probably ramp up to some ability in that language. But parents oftentimes are stranded. They oftentimes will either engage with the community of native speakers in the environment, or just have a much harder time learning the language. And so what tends to happen with these parents is, in typical scenarios, they're not engaged in the child's education. And we know from a number of studies that if parents are involved in a child's education, that improves learning outcomes. So one of the ways we can involve parents who don't speak the native language is to provide them translations in their native language, to at least give them background on what's being talked about.
So there's this app.
Whenever you speak,
And it's breaking language barriers.
you want to transfer an idea to another person.
This is Chinook Middle School, and they're speaking with parents like never before.
You've downloaded that Microsoft Translator app. Enable your phone to take a picture of this code, and then once you join, you're able to pick your language you'd like to have it speak.
They're trying to break the multi-language barrier by holding a conversation together.
In the bottom of our presentation, the translation just coming over in English.
How does it work?
The sound waves are picked up by the microphone.
There was a question, and the library is open during tutorial.
So these parents speaking 9 different languages can hold one conversation together. They're using Microsoft AI technology, including a machine learning technique based on a form of computing called neural networks, inspired by human brains. Basically, it learns to translate based on real-world speech, not rules programmed in advance. That's Russell, the principal. He said he knows that
engaging the parent community leads to better outcomes for our students.
And at this school, they're using tools to bridge that communication gap.
It brings voices from abroad and makes us neighbors of people.
Have you ever felt a real need to do this? To communicate an idea to someone?
This is another example of the kinds of engagements. This is a one-on-one meeting with a parent, which might be more common, in fact. And there, you can have, like what they show here is the teacher's talking on the laptop, the parent's on her phone, and they're able to go back and forth. So the parent's speaking Spanish, the educator is speaking in English. But it could also be done on a single device. I give you a couple of example videos here. One basically shows this kind of 2-device setup, but there's also a good demo about using just the mobile device. So we have a recent update that we've made to the Microsoft Translator apps. This is just on iOS currently, but it will go to Android, I think within a month or two. You'll see in this picture where you have 2 people talking to each other and the app is on the table, and it's actually in both directions, and we have it set up so you don't have to push the buttons on the phone. You just set the phone down, you indicate the 2 languages that are being talked, and then it automatically recognizes which language is being spoken and then translates appropriately. There's a video here which I'll just go ahead and play, and you can kind of see how this works. So this is a video showing the latest auto feature that I just mentioned. And the way you start is you start by selecting the audio button, then you select the languages, select auto, and then it will automatically enable the speaker, the microphones whenever someone's talking. Now I paused here because there's this button here too, which is very interesting. What this does is it inverts this side for the person on that side. So what you'll have is text that will be oriented towards the speaker on this side that will be on this side of the screen, and then text oriented the other direction for the speaker that's on that side of the screen. So that's actually, I think, very convenient for these kind of scenarios where you have 2 people talking and speaking 2 different languages. It will automatically recognize the languages that are being spoken. That's currently available just for iOS right now, but that is going to be available on Android soon. So a good example of this again is if you look at this image, 2 people sitting at a table, and they basically just turn on auto mode, and then they can talk freely with one another. The captions will show on the screen, but it also plays the audio translation for each of the individuals, for the two individuals. And then coming back to the non-English speaking parents, I kind of keep hitting on this topic, but I think it's important to recognize that there are a number of issues with doing this, and we've played through these scenarios a lot with educators, and we've come up with a number of solutions that make it work better. So let's suppose you have a meeting like this that's coming up. You have parents that are non-English speaking. You have a group of them that are coming. How in the world are you going to engage with them? Okay, I've shown you how you can use this tech, but there's still the problem of you're prepping for it. You're going to have these languages that are going to be represented. You know what the languages are, maybe in advance, but how do you tell them what to do? I mean, that part of the problem is that they have to join this. They have to figure out how to use their device to join the session in their language, but they don't understand English. So how do you tell them what to do? I mean, that's actually a really hard problem then, especially if there are multiple languages being spoken. What we've done is we've created a set of parent-teacher conference letters. So these have been translated manually into over 70 languages, so supporting all of our main languages. And they're in Word documents that you can go in. They're written in each of the languages, and you can go in and put your information, like the school address, let's say, or other information about the school where they're going to need to attend, or maybe it will be online and you want to provide what they need to join. Maybe it's a Teams meeting, you provide that connection information there, or what have you. That letter can be emailed to them or mailed to them, or however you want to get it to them. And now they're able to they'll have instructions in advance on how to use the Microsoft Translator app. So it will be instructions in their language about what to do when they show up, how to scan the QR code, how to key in the code. All of the stuff that I've showed you how to do, they'll have in their respective languages. So that's again on the Translator EDU site. So let's talk about this in more detail. I'm going to show you how to actually start a session yourself. So this is the multi-device conversation where you can have multiple people join in multiple languages. And what's nice is this Microsoft multi-device feature allows a variety of different devices. It can be apps on the phone. It can be apps or browsers on tablets, so like on an iPad, for instance, or laptops, or any kind of computational device that has a browser. And then, so these are the different apps that we support. One thing I do want to mention, I didn't, there it is, okay. We also have, OneNote is integrating this as well. This is currently in preview. I wanted to mention this, and there's a video about this.
Here I am in OneNote for the web, and I'm going to go to the View tab. And I'm the student in this case. So the student is in here, and way over on the right here, there's a live captions button, and I'll click that. The live captions pane opens. Now as the student, I'm going to paste that join code my educator gave me and join the session. And I'm going to choose a captions language. You'll see there are almost 70 languages in here, and I'm going to choose English to start and click join. But I could choose a different language and caption in that language. Now, what you're seeing on the right are captions coming through in real time. So if I'm a student, I can get these captions right here, and I can take notes at the same time. So over here in OneNote, I can still say I am taking notes. Now, let's say the educator was saying something, and I was like, wait, I forgot what they were saying. That was something important. In the upper right, I'll click pause. I can pause those captions in real time. So now I can go up here, and maybe I want to highlight something. So I'm going to turn on the yellow highlighter, and I'm going to go and I'm going to highlight something. That's yellow, that's important. Oh, this part is important here. You maybe want to go and change the colors to make a different color. And I can even make the text bigger. So if I drop down this right here, I can make the text a little bigger so I can see it. Now the educator's continuing to talk while I pause these captions. And a lot of students would worry that they're going to miss all that information. Well, if I hit resume, what you can see is everything that the professor or the educator was saying is captured right here. So that is really inclusive. Maybe that's something where there's too much information coming and I couldn't absorb it all. Now, the other nice thing is that everything that I was saying is automatically captured. Look over here on the left. You're going to see a transcripts section that is automatically created. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to close the live captions pane, And when I switch over to transcripts, you'll see everything that was being talked about was captured automatically and saved in my OneNote, the entire transcript. So you can see on the transcripts section, this page was automatically created, and it has the join code, the transcript, the date. It even captures all the highlights that I made when it was over there in the captions pane. So all transcripts are automatically saved. And we know from research that having transcripts and live interactive captions helps improve student outcomes across the board inclusively. Now I'll briefly show using live captions using a different language. So again, on the View tab, way over on the right, I click Live Captions, and I'll enter my join code. And this time I'm going to choose a different language. There's all these different languages here. And the language that I choose in this case is going to be Japanese. And I'll click Join. Now you can see the Japanese characters coming through, and if I speak a different language than maybe the educator speaks, this is very easy for me to follow along. Maybe I'm sitting way back in the class, or maybe I want to make sure to capture everything for later. I can do the same as before, and everything will go into the transcripts. So this is OneNote Live Captions.
So I want to talk about a couple of other topics that I get questions about all the time. One is support for deaf and hard of hearing students or parents. We are actually used quite a bit in schools for this kind of scenario. We've been partnering with Phonak, who makes devices for deaf and hard of hearing people for primarily for transmitting audio. So like students can have attachments to their hearing aids or their cochlear implants that will produce audio in their devices, but we can also capture that audio stream and caption it. So this is an example Phonak device that a lot of educators use in the United States, and this device is basically a microphone that transmits audio directly to the student's hearing device, but also you can generate captions off of it. So what's nice about this, and there are instructions here on how to do that, you can have audio that's transmitted to the students, which is very helpful for them, and then also from the same device generate captions. Other questions I get are about quality, and I want to talk about how we measure quality. And I think this is an important discussion to have because we're looking at automated tools for generating transcripts and captions. And how good is it? What's the quality? What we've found is by measuring people who caption for a living versus our device, there are differences in quality. So CART is the service that's used in the United States. There are services around the world for this. This is an example of a caption device. So this is basically a person who's a stenographer, just like you would see in a courtroom, who uses this device to caption the audio that's being said within that current environment, and then the caption stream shows up on the computer or other devices in the room. The CART captionist typically has an error rate, so we measure the amount of error, an error rate of around 4 to 6%. It's important to recognize that even a human is not at 0%. Humans have error in their caption feed. When they are captioning, the best you can get is around 4 to 6%. Now, what I'm saying there is important to recognize. That's the very best you can get. Generally, it's higher than that. So when a person's captioning, the error rate can go up if they're maybe less skilled, or they don't hear the audio as well, or maybe they don't understand some of the vocabulary that's being talked about. Maybe it's some technical vocabulary and they just don't understand it. That increases the error rate. Our service gets an error rate. It varies widely depending on a bunch of factors like the microphone, the amount of noise in the environment and such like that, of around 8 to 15%. We have work that we've done in this space, and these numbers keep changing because we keep working on this, where we're, we've achieved through research projects a human parity level. So meaning that we have caption percentages or error rate percentages that are competitive with human captioning. These tend to be slower, so they're not in production. Our production models are very fast. These have an error rate of around, again, like I said before, around 8 to 15%. Now that's for same language captioning. For translation, that's much more difficult to measure. And that tends to increase the error even more because you have the error rate that's happening within the English, let's say, when someone's speaking English. If there's an error in the English, that of course will be an error in translation, and sometimes other things are just lost in translation. They don't translate well, perhaps, and so you'll have an error there as well. So the error rate tends to be higher when you're crossing language boundaries. What we found, though, is that people adapt pretty readily to this technology.
Thanks, Will. That's really interesting, really interesting. I'd like now to bring our panel of teachers who are going to fire off questions to you right now. And our first question comes from Sharon.
Thanks, Troy. Thanks, Will. That's amazing. I'm Sharon Lehman. I'm a teacher with TAFE and I teach other teachers, and I'm also a learning technologist. Teachers are always asking me how effective it is, which you've really answered so well, but how about effective is it with an accent? We have a lot of teachers with accents, please.
Great question. So I talked a little bit about accuracy overall, but I didn't kind of break it down with different accents, different ways of talking. And that will vary. I mean, I have to be honest, different accents will produce different quality. One of the things we've been working on is to make it work as broadly as possible and supporting different accents. So we're doing this in two ways. We're continually updating and training the generic model that I kind of used in this presentation, but we're also making region-specific models as well. And what I mean there is that you'll have speech recognition for, let's say, in Australia. So you have the Aussie dialect generally supported. So we actually have plans to release updates that support regional dialects. It won't be every region in the world, but our plan is to support a variety of regions, major regions within the world.
Hello everyone, my name's Amy. It's been fantastic to hear what you've all been talking about, but I just wanted to have a think about this and ask you, Will, in a different way. I work with a group of students. I lead a team of teachers and school support officers to work with our deaf and hard of hearing students. We use sign language in the classroom with our students, but I'm finding that I'd like the students to be part of group work with other students without having to have the sign language interpreter jumping in all the time. So how effective would it be to place an iPad on the table with the translator app up and running, where all the students are using the one device so that they're connecting with each other rather than trying to connect through a laptop, and we're still developing that social connection between everybody?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the real upsides, I think, of this technology is kind of the self-empowerment of it. As someone who's deaf or hard of hearing, for instance, can show up with their own device and then use it to help caption audio that's in the environment. How to use it in a group setting, I think, gets a little bit more complicated. If it's one student, I think it's relatively easy. The device could be placed in front of that student, for instance, and try to capture the audio in the environment. If you have multiple students, the real problem is, how are they going to see the captions? How are they going to read those captions if it's on one central device? So what we tend to recommend in those kinds of scenarios where you want to support group work is some sort of multi-device kind of engagement, where you have a couple of devices or maybe several devices that are being used, and then people talk into those devices. That doesn't mean, what happens, what we tend to find with that is that people get accustomed to it. All of a sudden their behavior changes a little bit at first. They have a hard time adapting to it, but then they get used to it, and then they just start talking to the device as what they do. And then what happens is everyone else is joining that conversation and gets captions of what's being talked about. It's possible also you could, if you have a microphone, and I've seen classrooms with this where there's a microphone that gets passed around. So a microphone that's maybe even streams the audio to hearing aids or cochlear implants, And that microphone's already being passed around because you want to be able to stream the audio from the student questions to the hearing aids and cochlear implants as well. And so what you can do then is if you're able to capture that audio from that device, maybe that's going to some central location, then you can caption that as well. So then the students can see the captions on their local devices.
Awesome. Our next question comes from Adrian.
Hello, my name's Adrian. I'm an assistant principal, and my school is a very multicultural school. My question is, do you have any tips to improve the translation accuracy without using a wireless mic? Will adjusting your pace or the distance to the microphone make a difference? I just noticed that the words and the phrase corrections at the end of each sentence.
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of it is if you can have a mic close to the mouth, it tends to improve the quality. But the underlying speech recognition, we're working on supporting a variety of scenarios. And so a lot of times when I'm using speech recognition in meetings, I'm using the little microphone in my camera, as it turns out. I'm not using a headset. And it works really well. And one of the reasons it works really well is because there isn't other noise in the environment. So it's just captioning me. There's no other signal that's coming in that's going to confuse it. If you have a controlled environment where it's not particularly noisy, I will do well even with the microphone that's in the computer. But you will always improve quality if you can get the microphone closer to the person who's talking. That's just an invariant aspect of speech recognition that really hasn't changed for years. The closer the mic is to the person talking, the better it does. So I recommend that if at all possible, it could be a headset like what I'm wearing, where I have something that is close talking like this. It can be a handheld mic where I'm holding a mic below me. It could be a lapel mic. It could be, a variety of other devices that I can wear. I tend not to like the mics that are used for remote meetings if this is an in-person meeting that cover both ears, because then you are basically affecting your ability to interact then. You won't hear someone who's talking, you'll just hear yourself. So this mic, the reason I like this is because it's going over my head, and then I have just this little wand that sticks down close to my mouth. But there are a large variety of these devices out there, and we tend to do pretty well across the variety of them.
Thanks, Will. I'm Tom Hartley here. I'm a digital technologies teacher. Our campus is Prep to 9, and I'm currently rolling out the digital technologies curriculum. And I just had a question around this translator. Have you got any recommendations of any Python libraries or any coding examples that you might be able to share?
Yeah, great question. A very technical question, but I do have an answer for you. The Microsoft Translator, and I think I kind of mentioned this in in part of my presentation, underlyingly, it's using an API that you can call. So our apps call it the different tools, like if it's integrated into different tools, like even in PowerPoint, they call that underlying API to do speech recognition and translation. That is available externally. So someone can develop tools over our infrastructure, develop their own tools. And so we have code examples. I'm going to pull this up. So we have a GitHub repository that has a whole bunch of example translator tools with source code that you can use or modify to support a variety of things. So if you have students that want to work with Microsoft Translator themselves, maybe they want to develop some tool that does translation, they can look at the code samples here, and then it will give them ideas about what to do and how to do it. And we have them across a bunch of different languages, different tools. Document Translator is just translating like Word documents or PDFs. So you can take this and modify it and translate a variety of documents. But then there are all sorts of other kinds of example code snippets. And Python is an example here for text translation, how you can do text translation in Python. And this is some sample code that gives you some examples about how to do a translation session in Python. Now, this is mostly focused on text translation. I don't know that we have any that are speech translation focused. Yeah, it doesn't look like it. It's using the same underlying API, and so what I showed you using the Microsoft Translator apps, that multi-device functionality, is actually represented within the API set, and there's documentation on that. I don't have the screen for that, but you can create a session or you can join a session from your own tool. So just like we did with OneNote, we integrated that in using that API. Someone could do that with their own tool. If they wanted to basically, okay, I'm going to do something that's integrated into my Blackboard, let's say, that does this multi-device conversation thing, and maybe you have a student that's really adept at this kind of coding, that's something that they could in fact do.
Thanks, Will. That's amazing. And I know there's going to be a lot of teachers that are going to be listening to this and watching this and thinking, wow, there's so much I can do with this tool for EAL students, for hard of hearing students, and even, you know, mainstream students as well. So thanks very much for being a part of this.
You're quite welcome. It was a lot of fun and hope to see you again soon.
Okay, so that's it for today. I hope you had a really good time. I hope you also learned a whole lot. I know there's some really amazing applications for this tool. If you want to access today's webinar, then please just click on this link right here, and that'll take you to the recording. If you're wanting to catch up on some of our other webinars, then you can click on this link right here, and you can be taken to my YouTube page, which has got all our recordings from past webinars. Thanks very much for being a part of this, and I hope you have a great day.